Hi, everyone. It's Emily here today, and I am with a very special guest, Catherine Mitchell Jaxon, who I know you heard her wonderful intro before you started listening, but she's a mom of three, a food allergy parent, which we're going to talk about, and more importantly, the co-founder of Mission MightyMe, which if you are an active NAPS podcast listener, then you've heard me talking about their product inside of our ads because I love them so much. And so, yeah, I will dive in more on Catherine's company, but they are on a mission to end the food allergy epidemic and make things easier for parents in introducing allergens, using actual research and science behind their product. But I'm also excited to have Catherine here today because you're just like a real life mom, just like the rest of us, just trying to do all the things. So welcome, Catherine. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm so excited to be here. And yes, I am a real live tired mom, just like I know you are.
We might have to sneak in some sleep stuff while you're here today.
Right. Seriously.
And tell everyone how old your kids are.
So our girls are 12 and 13 now. And then our caboose, James, is 7. So we've got 3
like
kiddos.
Very similar in that, right? So like Grace and Maddie are 6 and 7. I mean, she'll be 8 soon, Grace, and then my caboose is Eloise, my little 1-year-old right now.
A caboose is the best thing ever.
I love the caboose, man. She's the best baby ever.
Well, in the first 2 years, it's just a blur. You just, you're in survival mode. I feel like by the time the caboose came along, I was like, oh, I can focus.
True. Literally, when Eloise was a small baby and my husband and I were home together on maternity, paternity leave, we used to look at each other and be like, what were we doing with Grace and Maddie? Like, we thought we were so busy and like so much happening.
Right. You have no idea.
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to tell everyone about like your company and how it came to be, because I know it connects to just being a mom and like your own kids. But I was super curious to ask you about your previous life because it's very interesting. I was told that you used to work at CNN and you literally worked like 24/7, crazy hours. What was that life for you? And then like, how did you all of a sudden end up now you're in like the food industry and own your own company? Like, I'm dying to know.
Total career change. But yes, so I used to work for CNN. I was a producer for the primetime nightly newscasts for almost a decade. Just thought it was my dream job. Like when I was a little girl, I used to read about Christiane Amanpour and dream of being Christiane Amanpour one day. And then all of a sudden, I'm in New York. I'm producing these nightly, the primetime shows. I get to work with Christiane Amanpour, Anderson Cooper, all of these journalists who I had just admired for so long, and just felt like I had landed my dream job. And I had. I mean, I was, just getting to like cover such fascinating stories, travel all over the place. At that point, pre-kids, I loved that. Send me anywhere, I will go. Interview fascinating people. I felt like every day on my job, I was learning something new, and I loved that piece of it. And then I also had this just incredible work family because we did travel so much and our schedules were so crazy that for a lot of us at CNN, our work family was sort of our second family because we spent so much time together.
Similar to like the nurses, right? Because your shifts were longer, but when you're with the same people every day for like 12, 13, 14 hours in a row, you get so close. And
totally.
They're your family. I totally get that. The L&D nurses and the nurses that I worked with they still are. But on the unit like that, it's your family. It's awesome.
It's your family. Totally. And then, you go, and I'm sure it's the same with nursing. You go through really intense experiences together. I mean, more so for nursing, I'm sure, but we were covering really intense things. We were covering 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina. And, a lot of times we were all sort of in survival mode, ourselves, trying to get our jobs done. And so it was this very like strong bond. And I'm still super close with so many of my former CNN colleagues. But that all sort of changed, to answer the second part of your question. I had been there for a little over 10 years when we had our first child. And, I don't know why, but it had never occurred to me like my job might need to change or my lifestyle might need to shift when I have a baby. I just sort of thought, people do this all the time. We'll have this baby. She'll fit into our crazy schedule. It's gonna like nothing's gonna change. And then we had our first child, Niall, and I remember like suddenly having this sort of like sickening realization that this career that I had worked so hard to build might not be a perfect fit with
Right.
motherhood, or at least, being the kind of mom that I wanted to be. I suddenly realized like I'm not going to be okay missing milestones or, missing. And when she's a baby, you don't think this far in advance, but it became like, I'm not going to be okay missing the Valentine's party at her preschool. And I just had this realization that like, wow, my career and what I want out of being a mom, really don't jive all of a sudden.
Sometimes it's hard to think that way or understand that feeling when you're expecting or before you have kids. I mean, some of us can start to think about it and wrap our heads around, but there are these women that I work with as moms, and it's when the baby's here and when they finally like step into their new home with this new baby, and all of a sudden your life has completely changed in an amazing way. But it's then that you can actually finally process things like that might have felt like an easy decision or something that wouldn't be a big deal, or you just really can't know that feeling sometimes until you like walk through your door and you're like, wow, okay, this little person has completely changed my life. And I feel like I would imagine at CNN the hours, like what the hours must be all the time. Like, you don't probably know when you're coming home. I mean, I've interviewed reporters before and they're getting up at like 2 a.m. to start their day, or they're out in the field like into the middle of the night. Like that, I would imagine that would be really challenging.
Yeah. I mean, there's no predictability, right? So,
Right.
if there's breaking news, and I just remember thinking like every day I feel like I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. If there's breaking news, you are gone and there's no
Right.
way to
Right.
predict that or plan for it. And my husband, JJ, also had a job where he was traveling a ton. And, it was just sort of logistical, like, how are we both going to do this? How are we both going to be gone? And for me, it would be gone without much notice and not knowing when I would come back. And then also it's a you want to be producing the primetime nightly news shows, but that also means that even when you
Right.
are in town, you are at work when everybody else is at home with their family because that's prime time, right? So for years I was on a show where like our show ended at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And living in New York, that's not a big deal. Restaurants are
Oh,
open, the city is
I'm
still
laughing because
going.
Jamie and I went out to dinner last night for work, and the event went till 10. And I was like, oh my God, at 10 o'clock. I'm so old
No, I mean, I'm like in bed by, 10 o'clock. It is lights out
Yeah, yeah. Oh
now.
my gosh. So, I mean, ultimately, you obviously left CNN and you started your own company. I I know that there's this like personal element to your company, right? Because so I want you to tell more people about like what it is that you do, but I guess what I'm wondering is I'm aware that like your child had an allergy, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that's sort of what inspired you for your company. Did you like leave CNN at first because that wasn't your path right then and there, and then later came this experience, or like what was the order of business? Because it's really scary to make a career change as a woman in a really competitive space like that, having just had a baby. Like that's a scary jump to make. So how did you make
Yes.
that jump?
It was very scary, and it was a two-step process.
Okay.
So I had actually, I will say CNN was, while the work environment was crazy, and it just is the nature of the job, like you just have to be okay with it.
Right.
They were really good about trying to make it work. While I was on maternity leave, actually, I remember sitting in the hospital having just delivered, I think it was day 2, right before I went home. And they had offered me a job from which, normally would have been my dream. And it was to run the documentary unit, to be the executive producer of the documentary unit. And I remember sitting in the hospital and crying, thinking like, I have so much joy over this, amazing little baby that I'm holding, and so much angst over thinking about how on earth I would take on more than I already had, right, when I left, and be the mom that I want to be to this precious baby. And so I talked to a former boss and mentor of mine who I adore, I'm still in touch with. And he said, the problem is you want to have your cake and eat it too. And you can't do that. And I sort of thought, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
I want to do that. I want to be
Okay.
the mom I want to be, and I still want to have a fulfilling career. So I actually turned down the promotion, went back to work to a new boss who did not know me, had not worked with me, in the past. We didn't have all the history. And I remember my first day back in the office, she sat down with me and she said, I want to know if you want to be on the mommy track or the producer track. And I thought to myself, I'm not making that decision. That's not a decision I'm willing to make. I want to do both. I want to have a fulfilling career,
Right.
and um and I want to be the kind of mom I want to be. So I sort of decided a little
I'd
bit
like
down
to
the
work
road.
for someone that doesn't make me choose a track and will support me on the one track to achieve both things. Like that's
Exactly.
incredible. But I know that that happens to lots of people in the workspace.
Yes, and
Mind blowing.
it is. And I just felt like that's not a women shouldn't have to make that decision. Dad shouldn't either, right? It's not like you have a child and you do change. Like you are a mother, you are a father, you go
Right.
back to work and it is different. And you are going to have so many more pulls on your time and your emotions. And it's not going to be exactly the same.
Right.
So I did end up, deciding to take time off from CNN, which was such a hard decision because, like I said, it was my family.
Right.
And we spent 24/7 together in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people feel this way. Like my work was sort of my identity. I mean, it was like all I had time for. And
Yeah.
I loved it. And so it was okay for a long time. But then all of a sudden, I felt like I needed to step back. And that was really hard. Um, and loved the time I had. We talked about this earlier, but ended up having 2 babies in almost a year, back
And
to back.
when did the second baby come in this timeline?
So I was 6 months, or no, sorry, Niall, our oldest, was 6 months when I realized that I was pregnant with Harper. And the way I realized this, because I was still nursing, and all of a sudden I had no breast milk. And I was back at work and I was like, what on earth? Where did it go? Is it because I'm back at work? And anyway, I took a
And you're like, I mean, they told me stress might impact my supply,
yeah,
but this is like crazy.
yeah. And I was like, I've been pumping non-stop. I'd be on conference calls muted, in the
Yeah.
lactation room. I was like, I'm really trying to not let it disappear, and it had disappeared. And I ended up taking a pregnancy test, just thinking like, there's no way. This is way too, there's no way. And sure enough, I was pregnant. So
Hey.
I ended up deciding to take time off from CNN.
Okay.
I still did some, freelance and consulting, but I just wanted to make sure I was able to have flexibility.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of what I did for a couple of years. And then we moved from New York to Atlanta. And, I still was just very much like, I want to be able to put them first. But I still want work. I still need to work. And I also realize that that is like such a luxury to be able to make that decision. And I don't take that for granted for a minute. Like I was so thankful that I was able to make the choice.
Right.
But it was like very important to me that I could spend time with them, not miss the milestones. But I still really wanted to work.
I
Like I still had
understand.
that
I
itch to
know.
work.
Right. I do feel that, we obviously shouldn't have to choose. I think the saying of like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. I'm like, that's bullshit, right? But the layer that I can get behind is that we can have all the things. They're certainly never all balanced or perfect though, right? And so like one week I feel like I'm slaying it here at work and I'm
Yeah.
like really on my game and I'm putting in more of the hours because it needs more attention. But maybe I'm not like as present as much with my kids that week, vice versa, and then
Yeah.
we're managing like our care for ourselves and our partners. So there's so many layers of of the cake, right? But we still can have the whole cake.
Totally.
It's just like
Right.
every day, each hour, each day, each week calls our attention in different directions. But I still just truly believe that you shouldn't have, no mom or dad should have to make that choice. So I'm sorry that
Exactly.
was your
And it
experience too,
just,
but I think in a good way, it obviously brings you somewhere else in your life. But yeah, for those
yes,
listening,
exactly.
I think that's bullshit. I think you can have your cake and eat it too.
I totally agree. And then we can talk more about this later, but like with our company, with Mission Mighty Me, that is what we have tried to create because, I didn't want to have to make that choice.
Mhm.
And flexibility was everything to me, and it just wasn't possible in that particular role that I was in. But it is possible. You can create something where there is flexibility. And I wish the choice wasn't so stark for a lot of
Right.
parents in the workforce. But I do think maybe it was a blessing in disguise because I might never have left and wouldn't have figured out a way to make it work on terms that I was happier with.
Now, from what I understand, most of your team now are working women, right? And some of the moms, which is
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
And I guess comparing like that family life at CNN and that dynamic there, and now this new environment that you've created in your own workspace, um, like what's that vibe like? I mean, I have a good guess, but I'm gonna guess that that work environment looks a little different that you're building.
Totally different. First of all, our team is amazing. Um, there's so many things I'm really proud of with Mission Mighty Me, but like one of the things I am the most proud of is the team that we have built because they are all complete rock stars. We have a team of 7 women. All of them are moms.
Oh, they're all
Um,
moms.
they're all moms.
Wow.
They are all varying degrees of part-time and virtual. And don't get me
Okay.
wrong, we still get together. I think in person is so important, but on a daily basis, everybody is virtual. And they work when they want to work.
Yeah.
Our virtual meets, our, Zooms or Google Meet or whatever we're on, usually has like at least 3 or 4 babies, in the shot. Someone's got their baby sitting right there. Or maybe they're nursing or giving them a bottle or they're off camera because they're, dealing with their little one. But it is a completely different environment. And most of them already have little ones. So their kids have been they're our taste testers, they're
Oh
our
yeah.
focus group, they're our, we jokingly call them our peanut panel. Every time we have a photo shoot, it's all of our
I love
employees'
that.
beautiful children. But believe it or not, out of 7 of them, 5 are expecting baby number 2 or baby number 1 in the next year. So
That's
we will have 5
amazing.
of our 7 employees and
That's
6,
amazing.
6 if you include a wonderful pediatric allergist that we work with, all on maternity leave in the next year.
There's no one more productive than the working mom.
Oh my
And
gosh.
the fact that you allow them to be virtual or in person or get their work done on their schedule, like I would be willing to bet that you not only have like a thriving and happy team, but like people that are actually very productive.
Absolutely. I mean, nobody is more productive than a working mom. You don't have time to do it any other way, right? And
Yeah.
these moms can all like just multitask. I mean, and they don't, they're all so independent. They were all just at the top of their game in their respective fields, right? And for varying different reasons, and for some of them it was, starting a family, but like everybody wanted a little more flexibility. And so now we feel so lucky. JJ and I feel so lucky. JJ, by the way, is like, I am just the odd man out. I can't even, I can't even relate to half of the conversations on our Zoom calls.
Oh my gosh.
But, they're all total badasses and
They are.
great at what they do. And feel so lucky to have them.
What I think is so interesting. So we at NAPS, one of our support groups that we run is working moms, like a working moms survival group. I have one that starts today actually, and so it's basically 10 women, and they join the group. They have kids. They might have 1 or 2 or 3. It doesn't really matter, and they could have a newborn or a toddler, but they're working moms. And a constant theme that they tell me, like especially my moms in like corporate America, is that when they return and they've had a baby and return to the CNN or the job that they had, that if they ask for help in the workspace, that it's often perceived as she can't do it, or she has too much on her plate, or she just had a baby and there's too much going on at home, like she can't hack it here, right? Like, and so women often then in the workspace don't ask for help. And I think what's really cool about having a team of these 7 women who are also moms is that obviously they work very independently and they're efficient, as you told me, but I would be willing to guess that they can support each other, and the environment just must be so refreshing because you could ask for help of other moms and there's no like judgment or stigma because of the playing field.
Totally. I mean, it is the most supportive team. Everybody's in it together, and we've all been there. So, I mean, if someone's baby has the flu, or is sick and needs, Pedialyte, I mean, literally the team will be like, okay, like, I think there was one time last year where maybe they both, the mom and the baby, had COVID. It was and they're fine, but it was something like she's not going to be able to go get what she needs. And
Right.
So the team was like, all right, here's what she needs. She needs children's Tylenol. She needs this, she needs that, soup. And so everybody's like, all right, we'll get it there. So yeah, there's no shame in asking for help. And if anything, I feel like everybody totally gets it and wants to be supportive. And we're unique because our entire team is in that stage of life, right? And I do think people forget, like, you get out of the trenches and you forget how hard it is. And so I think, in a big company, you're not going to have everybody completely empathizing necessarily, but I think it's so important for people to remember, like, it is so hard the early years, and we're out of it now, but I remember like the baby years are so hard, and working moms and working dads need a lot of support and a lot of grace. And that doesn't mean you don't like rock your job and you don't get your work done. It just may happen on a different schedule than it
Totally.
used to.
I know. But I want to talk more about Mission Mighty Me. I mean, you have 3 kids and one of them has an allergy.
Yes.
Do you want to like tell everyone a little bit about sort of that story and then how the company came about?
Yes. So our company, I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Your idea is inspired by a personal pain point. And for parents, that's especially true because as parents, you're experiencing all these new things that are personal pain points. And you're like, why does that pacifier suck? You know, like, why is there a better pacifier? And why does my stroller not collapse quickly? And I remember
Why
when
am
we
I holding these pumps to my boobs?
exactly like I need to multitask while I'm pumping.
Right.
So there are all these things where you're like, oh, I could do this so much better. So I literally had a file this thick of ideas after we had our first
You're
child.
like, which one would it
Oh,
be?
I still have it. I'm like, maybe we'll go back and start some of those. But what really like where it became like we have to start this is that, you know, our oldest daughter, who's now 13, we found out that she was allergic to pretty much all nuts when she was about 2.5. So when our girls were born, the common medical guidance was to avoid giving babies peanuts and other common allergens in infancy. And it had been that way for, you know, a decade at that point.
Yeah.
It's now been that way. It's totally changed, but it was like that for about 2 decades. And since that became the norm, like since we removed allergens from babies' diets in around the year 2000, the rate of food allergies has increased by 50% and the rate of nut allergies has tripled. So we didn't realize it, but we were all doing the exact opposite of what we were supposed to be doing. I did not know. We were just kind of following our pediatrician's advice at the time, which was like, just keep all these foods out of her diet. She had a tiny little taste of a walnut when she was like 2.5, and just ended up having a terrifying reaction. She immediately swelled up like a balloon. Her eyes were swollen shut. She was vomiting, and she thankfully was okay, but it was like a very scary reaction. And food allergies were like not on my radar at all. I did not have that. We didn't run in our family. She wasn't considered high risk. So we were shocked. And then after she had allergy testing, we realized she was allergic to pretty much all these nuts that she had never had before, which also blew my mind. Like, how could you be allergic to something you've never even had?
Right.
But we adjusted, did all the research, figured out how we needed to keep her safe, made sure we had, you know, an EpiPen in every diaper bag, in case we ever needed it again. And just assumed that these foods, like we would just never have these foods in our house, right? And that's what a lot of food allergy families do, because you're told to avoid them all.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to 2015, our third child was born.
Right.
And this was the year that this huge clinical trial called the LEAP study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. You know all about it, but basically the LEAP study showed that actually including peanut protein in babies' diets starting early in the first year of life, and then consistently is very important, consistently until age 5, prevented almost 90% of peanut allergies, which was
Incredible.
So huge. And it, you know, immediately there was a lot of press coverage. I remember reading something that Anthony Fauci said about the LEAP study, and he said, this is going to completely change how we approach food allergy prevention. We're talking about saving thousands and thousands of babies from peanut allergies.
Right.
And that just rocked my world. And I'm sitting here like, I have this little 6-month-old and I could potentially help him avoid an allergy like his big sister has,
Right.
if we can go ahead and get these foods in his diet now. But of course, that's easier said than done
Well,
because
I'm thinking like, yes, it's a research study and it's proven in the research, but to have been parents who have been conditioned for years upon years upon years to have do it this way. And then all of a sudden we have a complete opposite way. It
yeah,
can take, even with the research, it can take a lot of time and convincing to get people moving on something like a new recommendation like that. And I would imagine that it probably still is really scary to give your 6-month-old an allergen.
yeah, it was. I mean, especially for a food allergy family who'd seen what a reaction looks like.
Yeah.
Um, it was really scary. And it was also really hard because, I think this is like so important for families to, I mean, to understand, but like you can't give a baby peanut butter or nut butter. It's a choking hazard. You have to dilute it in some way. You could, mix it in with oatmeal or like dilute it with warm water. Same with nuts. You can't just give a baby nuts. They don't have teeth. Like a lot
Right.
of these allergenic foods are also choking hazards. And at the time, and really still, there were just no products on the baby aisle that contain these ingredients, like nothing baby friendly that made it easy. And I'm sitting here thinking like, how am I going to get, 10 different nuts in his diet? Am I going to grind up every single one individually? And
Right.
like, and then how do I do that regularly? It was just
And by
kind
the
of
way,
like,
not just nuts. We haven't even talked about eggs, shellfish,
exactly
all the other
all the
allergens.
things.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I said to my husband, JJ, I said, we have got to start a company that, you know, makes baby friendly foods that have these ingredients. And by the way, whether you care about preventing food allergies or not, whether that's even on your radar, these are foods that are incredibly nutritious for babies. I mean, like the top 9
Right.
allergens are really good for you. It's, it's
Yeah.
peanuts, it's tree nuts, it's egg, it's dairy, wheat, fish. I mean, like we've
Yeah.
removed all these foods from babies' diets and then we put them on rice cereal, which does nothing for them.
Yeah.
So like
That make them
we
like constipated.
exactly. So we need to create a line of foods that are baby friendly that contain these ingredients.
Right.
And so we reached out to a friend of ours who is a food allergy dad. He has twin boys who have severe nut allergies. And he also was one of the founders of FAIR, which is the largest food allergy nonprofit. And his name is Todd Slotkin. And we said, Todd, are we insane to want to start this company? And he said, no, I think it's important and we need products like these. And let's talk to Dr. Lack, who is the pediatric allergist who led the LEAP study. The whole idea of early introduction being protective was his hypothesis.
Right.
And then the LEAP study proved that with a huge definitive clinical trial. And so the 4 of us met in New York and kind of like went through like our vision for the company, and our vision was very aligned. We all felt like the products needed to match the research exactly, but they needed to not feel clinical, not feel
Yeah.
difficult for parents, not feel
Right.
scary. They needed to be something enjoyable that you would feed your child, whether you cared about preventing food allergies or not, just because they were a healthier, yummy snack. And
Yeah.
so that's how we decided to launch Mission MightyMe.
What a team of people that you pulled together into that room. It's so amazing. And I have to tell everyone out there, so your team mailed me like all of your flavors. The packaging is beautiful, by the way, but
Oh, thank you.
I am not just, and I said this to Catherine before when we were talking earlier, and I'm not just blowing smoke up people's asses, but like I am very fortunate in that people often send stuff to Jamie and I to try with our kids, and it's quite often when it comes to like puffs or bars or snacks that are healthier, my kids, they just might not eat it. But I ripped open with the red package. I remember doing the red one first. Which one's that?
Peanut, classic, just straight up
Classic,
peanut
yeah.
puffs.
And Eloise loved it. And so, and then I was saying my 6-year-old likes them too, to the point where I was like, so you can have these as a snack because they're, you know, I know that they have some nutrients for her too, but I'm like, you literally just can't eat all of them because you're literally, you were eating all of them before Eloise can even get 1 cup of them.
I
But
love
they,
it.
my kids loved them, and I was like, oh my God, finally, like a product that is beneficial, right? And is going to serve my kids in a way of like obviously preventing allergies, but also giving them nutrients that they'll actually eat.
Yes. And I mean, that was so central to our strategy with the products because,
You
and
know,
by the way, there are now options out there, right? Like you can get powders that you can mix into purees.
yeah,
And I think it is wonderful to have options. Parents need options.
right,
Not everybody's going to be looking for the same kind of product.
right,
Um, but what we really wanted to do was create something that like would be a family snack regardless. And this
yeah,
is very much because, Dr. Lack's initial observation, which made him think like, maybe early peanut introduction is actually protective, is that he was in Israel where they have almost no peanut allergy. And the number one snack in Israel, it is like our Cheerios, right? Is a
yeah.
peanut puff called bamba.
I love
Um,
bananas. My kids love those too.
I mean, they're delicious.
I know.
And so he conducted the clinical trials to prove it out, but that was his hypothesis.
Right.
And when James was born, Bomba was all you could get. So I was ordering it from Amazon.
Yep.
Um, and I just was like, I feel like I'm giving him junk food. Like I want to
Well,
give him
one type of peanut too, right? It just was the one ingredient versus
it's
you have
just peanut.
multiple different kinds of nuts inside of your products.
Right. So um we have 3 different peanut puffs: classic strawberry peanut puff and banana peanut puff. And it was so important to us to have clean ingredients because while we thought Bombas were yummy, I felt like I was giving our baby Cheetos. Like it felt like the junk food that we would pull out and kind of like
Yeah.
embarrassingly, hand them. But we couldn't figure out how to do all the tree nuts. There was no product that had all of the
Right.
nuts. And so we
I
also
know.
developed, if anyone's on YouTube, you can see the package. But so this is the version that has 5 nuts in it. And it's like just a super quick dissolve, yummy puff that has hazelnut, almond, cashew, walnut, and peanut. And again, the protein quantities match the research, but like you'd never have to worry about that if you just wanted it to be a better for you, yummy baby puff.
Yeah, because I felt like I could like handle the peanut aspect, but then when it came to all the other nuts with Grace and Maddie, right? This is because they're like
Yeah.
7 and 6. So like you know, back yeah, like really like sort of before and around the leap study. But when I do remember like feeling like I could give them peanuts, I mean I honestly gave them peanut butter because I like didn't know what else to do. But then when it came to all the other nuts, I was like,
It's
where
totally
am
overwhelming. There's so
I
many
to
of
like
them.
buy them and ground them up? So anyway,
Yeah.
and all of our listeners, by the way, you guys have generously offered everyone 20% off your products using unswaddled20 if you go to missionmightyme.com. So I think that's wonderful for anybody who is listening and wants to try them. I think it's wonderful. I like one sort of like final question for you. I know you're really busy running your business and your kids here, so I want to be mindful of your time. But I think there's a lot of noise in like the baby food allergy space. Like there's a lot of noise on social media and in the media in general and blogs and opinions. And so in general, starting solids and feeding your baby is a very hot topic. And so there can be a lot of opinions and people and noise in that space, right? And then now we have this layer of like allergies. So I think I'd love to know what your advice is for our parents listening of like what they should just really be keeping in their mind. And maybe like what noise could they shut out or like things that they could let go.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the main thing is just start early. Talk to your pediatrician early. Make sure your child is a candidate, get the green light from your pediatrician. And I only say that because, the guidelines right now are pretty complicated, unfortunately, but the AAP guidelines do say that if your child is high risk, meaning severe eczema and an existing egg allergy, you need to be evaluated by a doctor before you start introducing peanuts. But for most kids, the guidance is just to start at 6 months.
Yeah.
So really, like, I think one of the big deterrents that keeps a lot of parents from doing it is that fear of what if there's a reaction. And we know that actually,
1000%. I know
yes, and
all my naps moms listening right now would agree with that.
yes, because it's scary. And that's every parent's worst nightmare. And the one thing that I would say is that the earlier you start, even if there is an existing allergy already, the earlier you start, the less severe that reaction will be. So typically under 1, reactions are going to be hives, maybe vomiting, but you're not talking about severe anaphylaxis. However, the older babies get, the more severe those reactions become. So even if your baby had a peanut allergy, you'd much rather find that out at 6 months than you would at a year and a half.
Yeah.
And by the way, most babies, the vast majority of babies, are not going to have any issues, especially if you start between 4 and 6 months. So I think like the main takeaway is just do it. Talk to your pediatrician and then just do it. Start earlier rather than later. And then, the other thing that I would say is, like, once you've introduced a food, keep it in the diet. Don't try something and then never touch it again.
Right.
I've heard so many stories of parents who said, but he had, peanut butter at 6 months and he was fine. And then he had it again at a year and a half and he was allergic. And your heart breaks because that child could have had it prevented.
Right.
Um,
But you could
and
see as like a busy parent, that sounds like
yeah,
a lot of time. That time can go right on by. And you're like, I didn't even realize we hadn't given it again, or we don't need it that often. So just again, like, which is why just having handy products that are easy to use and available is just making it so much easier for parents.
yeah, to just keep it in the diet.
Wow.
So yeah, I would say just like start early, just talk to your pediatrician and start early. And then once you've introduced, keep it in the diet.
Yeah. And a reminder to everyone listening too, I will never be able to take away the fear of the parents that I work with in starting solids. Like we do a lot of education around this and coaching and get you as prepared as possible. But that element of like the anxiety and feeling a little bit nervous is still sort of there. And so I always tell our parents to take either our class or somebody else's for infant child CPR and first aid, where we also cover allergies. That way you're just empowered. And so like, while it's like we're saying here on this podcast, very unlikely, especially early and often, to have some kind of reaction, at least you're just like have the knowledge and power and you're armed and ready if so. And I feel like that gives parents like just another layer of confidence going into this process that can feel overwhelming.
Yes. And that's everything, right? You just like our goal really is to very similar to what you guys try to do is just empower parents with the information and the products, but like importantly, the information that they need to feel like they can feed confidently.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
feeding babies ultimately should be fun and enjoyable, not a scary process.
Agree. For sure. Oh my gosh, Catherine. Well, you're truly amazing. And your story is so incredible. Thank you for sharing it. It was such a pleasure talking with you today. And this certainly shouldn't be the last time for us to connect. We could talk about a lot of things, huh?
Yes, totally. Well,
Oh,
thank you
and
so
thank
much for
you.
having me.
Well, thank you for
I
sharing your
loved it.
products with my little Eloise and my big girls, and also just for our audience. So, just one final reminder: if you're listening, check out Mission Mighty Me and use the code Unswaddled20 to get 20% off your order. And trust me, you will not be disappointed. I promise you. Babies like them, and big kids like them too. So, thanks, Catherine, for being here. You're incredible.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
No problem.